We attempted to make it as realistic as possible. One of the directions we were given was, this movie is not to sound like a Hollywood film. I want it to sound real.
The visuals are so stunning that you really want to have the sound meld together with the picture and make a whole experience rather than one overstepping the other.
When we first saw the movie, we realized that this was a very important film, and it couldn't be mixed like every other film that we'd done in Hollywood. This had to be a special soundtrack.
The voices, the sound effects, everything about it was, it's so important. I mean, sound effects. Some of those can just be horrific. They can make something happen that, you didn't realize.
And given the film, it's a period piece. We had to be true to the period, but it was filmed in a very contemporary, stylized sort of way. The sound had to fit all of those criteria. That was the challenge that we had in front of us. During the fight sequence, first thing we needed to do was, like, on the punches, you had to get the right sound of the punch and the meatiness of it.
So I got leather coats, and I put it around my ankles, and I put a jacket around me, and I had part of my skin showing, and boom, 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 punching myself. Can we go back and get that one?
We had to run some of the punches through reverbs. That gave it just a psychological feel that it was a different reality. Kind of matched the slow motion movements of the soldiers and the apostles fighting.
When I first saw the movie, I thought this was going to be a pretty big job. All of the actors were Italian.
And the need was to go and record them in the language that was required to be authentic.
Silenzio, mi idiote.
First of all, we had to go through and decipher what was actually Italian in the movie, and then replace it with Latin words that would actually fit their mouths.
So we basically had to teach groups of people what we needed them to say.
Most of the production dialogue had to be replaced. So with that went the crowds. So all the crowds had to be reproduced.
That was a challenge of the ADR supervisor to get exactly what every person is saying, and it just brings the crowd to life and their emotions that they bring to the scene.
If we went from the dynamic of soldiers screaming and chanting to women sobbing, that in itself would tell part of the story. It would show the conflict there, that everybody wasn't on the same bandwagon.
Big concern that myself and Kami had with
to sit there and watch 18 minutes of somebody getting whipped almost becomes overbearing.
You didn't even need to hear the sound in order for you to cringe. So for us to try to make that huge, like a Schwarzenegger film, would have turned the movie into a cartoon.
Each hit had to have its own signature sound. And using library sound effects that we have as a first layer was fine, but it almost became very repetitious.
We honed in on the fine details and the subtleties of what was going on. What did that whip sound like?
In the production sound, there is actually no sound, or there is very little sound as they're hitting a piece of wood behind him.
We went to the Foley stage, and these Foley guys are great. They flesh elements, what it would sound like when that tears through the flesh.
We got like a leather jacket, and we put it against a punching bag, and we wet the leather because the skin of Jesus was all kind of sweaty and bloody at that point.
One of the key elements in the movie thematically is the cross that Jesus carries.
The identity of the cross had to be established early on.
So after listening to different types of lumber, I chose the railroad tie. It had the right thickness to it.
The way it was constructed for the movie, it had metal rings on it and whatnot.
We'd have to have the whole sound of the cross, not just the wood sound.
So it could sound very creaky and metallic, and clangs of metal bumping about as Jesus dragged it along the stone and dirt.
Basically, we ended up going to our hollow pit.
It's basically a piece of plywood that's hollow underneath. Using that gives a resonance, a weight, and a deepness to the sound.
Once we got the initial sound on the stage, it was up to me to lower the pitch of the cross along with using EQ to really make it deep.
So I would take those elements, put them into my software synth, and it create this growling, textural, it just was gut-wrenching.
For the nailing of the cross, we experimented with a lot of different types of nails.
You'll hear a high-pitched sound that gets higher and higher and higher as that nail goes in. Actually recording that is quite difficult.
We ended up setting up a lot of different nails at different heights to change the tone.
And then we just took those and stretched them and built them out to where we needed and just cut all these individual little sounds together to create the one sound.
Ehi, aspicite caniculi, evertite tignum.
In the end, where the cross is flipped over on its face and Jesus is hovering above the ground, this was a tough spot for everybody because we're in a different reality now. I actually used a church bell and time stretched that out, so it was like we totally flipped the sense of reality. So you heard an impact, but it wasn't the impact that you would expect to hear, which Mel bought, and it seemed to work well.
A scream for the devil. This is the kind of thing that the ADR people do.
At the last minute, we're in the final stages of mixing the movie, and we realized, what we have right now is just not cutting it. So we brought in Vincent from the Foley stage.
And they came to here and they said, would you guys like to give it a shot and try for the devil screaming?
And this guy just put everything into it. And we got the basis for what is now Satan's scream at the end is the loudest thing in the movie.
And to sit here in this room, while Vinny did this scream, and it was amazing. And I knew when I heard it, this is the scream they're going to use.
And we still were trying to create a subhuman feel out of this, too. So what I did was I took some horse screams, and I pitched them down just so that it wasn't a discernible horse scream, morphed them in with Vince. It was really never thought out in advance, but it just seemed to work.
We fully prepped the audio for any specific sound that was needed.
Everything has to be recorded. Every piece has to be there, and we can take and pick and choose. Oh, that's a really good leather sound. Let's just go with the leather sound here.
Sometimes we had between 200 and 300 tracks playing at one time, so it was a challenge to try to figure out which ones we should be hearing and which ones we shouldn't be hearing.
And now we need to start arriving at a style where we pull things out, accentuate things, and whatnot.
So you'd have to isolate things and get rid of some things altogether.
Temp dubs are the point of the movie where we get a chance to work out what sounds are going to work for what scenes. We didn't have that opportunity on this film, so it was up to myself and Bob Beamer to work through those balances before Mel even had a chance to come to the stage and listen to it.
And therefore we had to keep all the sounds prepared in a very flexible manner, more so even than normal, so that stylistically we could turn anything inside out, feature anything, get rid of anything at any time, because we were basically making up the style as we went along.
Working with Mel Gibson was a very unique experience. He's not an actor playing a director, he's a true director. This project was very close to his heart, so it was important for us to give him what he wanted. Everybody on this particular project really stepped up to the plate to create the soundtrack that it is, and it was just a fantastic experience for all of us.